Lord Mayor Nick Reece, welcome to the Future Melbourne podcast.
G'day, Sean. Great to be with you and all the hyper-local listeners.
Yes, that's right. Today's topic is Melbourne in 2050, which is a theme that you know a lot about, Nick, having led a summit on this particular topic and vision last year. And today's a culmination of sorts of the Future Melbourne podcast series. I say of sorts because we've had a lot of fun making it, and I dare say there'll probably be some more conversations to come into the future. But we're looking at today as a bit of a recap of sorts to reflect on that question about Melbourne in 2050, which you explored through the summit last year, Nick, but also the many topics that we've traversed throughout the course of this series, and get your quick sort of bite-sized recap on some of the big issues affecting the city. And I suppose also before we launch in, it's important to thank you not just for all the important work that you do championing the city, Nick, but the establishment of this podcast really wouldn't have occurred if it wasn't for the inspiration of 2050. So this is where it all came about. So thank you. Otherwise, we might not be here talking today. But I just want to set the tone for the conversation today from the get-go by letting you share a little bit about your personal background, Nick, your connection to Melbourne, what drew you into civic leadership for people who might not know you. But can you take us back a bit? Where does the Nick Reece story start, and what do you love so much about Melbourne?
Oh, wow. So what is this a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away? Look, like a lot of Melburnians, I was born overseas. I moved here when I was young with my family from England. Grew up in my early years in London. And like many, my family came here looking for a better life. Mm-hmm. Grew up in the outer suburbs of Melbourne, outer east, and, Melbourne was a place where our lives got better.
It's another great multicultural story.
Absolutely. My dad was a big influence on me. You know, he was always doing something at the local church or local school. He was a real community man.
And he was recently acknowledged at the Brotherhood of St Lawrence for his lifetime of work, wasn't he?
Yeah, he's with Vinnie's.
Vinnie's.
St Vincent Paul. And, he still volunteers for Vinnie's, delivering groceries and meals to people who would otherwise miss out around the city. In fact, it's wonderful the way he does that. So that was a big inspiration for me. Always understood the importance of community. It was something that my family was very into. And so I guess when I thought about my own life, helping people was what I wanted
and
to
specifically
do.
Melburnians.
And specifically Melburnians. I guess over the course of my working life, there's been a couple of big projects which I'm really proud of. I was one of the early directors of The Big Issue here in Melbourne.
Iconic publication.
Yeah, for those who don't know, The Big Issue is sold by homeless and marginalised people. You see them in their bright yellow and red outfits, and it's a really simple idea that the cover price of the magazine, half goes to the vendor and half goes for the production costs, including the great journalism that gets a run in The Big Issue. And, there has been tens of thousands of homeless and marginalised people who have used The Big Issue as a stepping stone to get their lives back on track. That's really great. I was also very involved with Movember from its earliest days. Saw that grew from a local effort here in Melbourne to become a worldwide movement. Movember is now the world's biggest men's health charity, focusing on prostate cancer, testicular cancer, and men's mental health. Yep. And it truly is a global movement. 8 million people have participated.
Something you still get involved in every November, I know.
Yeah, absolutely. Still love growing the mow, having a good laugh at myself, and, raising much needed funds for men's health.
Yeah, and politically, you've worked at a federal level in the ALP alongside prime ministers, but what made local government the place that you wanted to land ultimately?
Yeah, so I worked for Julia Gillard when she was PM, and did a short stint with Kevin Rudd as well. I worked for Premiers Brax and Brumby here in Victoria. And so I've been very fortunate in that I've worked in federal government, I've worked in state government, and now I work in local government. Local government, city government is my absolute favourite, I've got to say. I love the fact that it's the level of government closest to the people, closest to the community. I like to think of myself as a very practical person. I like fixing things, solving problems, helping people. And so the thing I love about city government is you get to think big, but you get to act local, and you get to make a real practical difference to people's lives.
So what does being Lord Mayor actually mean to you day to day?
Look, can I begin by saying to be the mayor of a city you love is the best job in the world. I pinch myself every day that I've been given this opportunity to lead this city I love, Melbourne, at this particular time in our city's history. And it's the most extraordinary thing about the job. The best thing about the job is that you get to meet all the people of Melbourne. In any one day, I can be meeting, kids growing up in the flats in Flemington, right through to, the captains of industry on Collins Street, and everyone in between. And so, when I say Melbourne is the best city in the world, I know it because I get to meet the people of this city every day and see the extraordinary things that they're doing. And I find that so extraordinary and so motivating that I just love it. Local government is really challenging. People, don't mind expressing their frustrations with you when things go wrong in local government.
You're right at the coalface.
You are indeed. And, local government, we don't have the resources, the fundraise, the taxation powers of the federal government. We don't have the legislative powers of the state government, but we seem to get all the problems. And when people's local problems aren't fixed, they get pretty cross pretty quickly. So you got to be on your toes every day. But, we've got a couple of things going for us. Number one, our superpower, level of government closest to the people. So we can really, rally people around particular projects, bring the community together, and that's an incredibly powerful thing.
We've seen a lot of different leaders, politicians, and in this context, Lord Mayors over the years with all different sorts of political styles. What kind of Lord Mayor or leader are you trying to be? Is it, you sort of alluded to it before, perhaps a leader that sort of rolls up their sleeves a little bit more, is it a bit more at the grassroots level?
Yeah, look, it starts with, I think, being a very practical person. This is my style of leadership, and, no problem too big, no job too small. So where I can fix things for people, solve people's problems, make people's lives that little bit better in some small way, I'm up for it. I also think a big part of my job is just explaining to Melburnians where we are, what our challenges are, what the opportunities are, and where we're going as a city. And also, my natural instinct is to try and bring people together, to try and bring this city together, unify people around the mission.
Champion Melbourne.
And then be that champion for Melbourne. Someone called me the other day, Melbourne's number one cheerleader. And I think they were trying to say it in a, cynical way.
Yeah.
But I took it as an absolute badge of honour.
Well, that's the job, isn't it?
I love being Melbourne's number one cheerleader. We are the best city in the world, and every day I'm out there trying to make it that bit better.
Yeah, and you came in to the role with some big ambitions and a big election policy agenda. What were among some of the first things that you thought, right, this is what I want to do?
Yeah, Sean. So when I ran for Lord Mayor, I went out there with a really big policy agenda. I'd done my apprenticeship working with the likes of Julia Gillard, Steve Bracks, John Brumby and others. And so...
And you've been on...
And of course Sally Capshaw, I must mention. I
was going to say, you've been on council for a couple of terms before that.
Who I served as deputy to her, which was a great honour. And yes, I'd served as a councillor prior to her. So I'd spent a lot of time, Sean, really thinking about, okay, if I get this opportunity, what do I want to do with it? So I went out with a really big policy agenda. It started with what I identified as the most pressing challenge for the city around city cleanliness and city safety, and went really hard after that. Also outlined a big agenda around parks and gardens, building Melbourne as that garden city. And then thirdly, just bringing the energy to the city and building out that events program that we're so famous for, making sure our businesses are thriving and that we're a prosperous city, and then just making sure Melbourne's a city that's alive with energy. And then finally, making sure Melbourne is that livable city as well. I summarise it as saying I want Melbourne to be the best and fairest city in the world.
Yeah.
When I say best, I'm talking about most prosperous, most successful. When I talk about fairest, I'm talking about sustainability, a city that cares, a city where we look out for each other, a city where we love and respect each other. We've got that compassion.
Yeah.
And just like winning the Brownlow medal, you got to be the best and fairest. And Melbourne, I want us to be the best and fairest city in the world.
Yeah. Let's get into the 2050 summit last year, what it was and why it mattered. So it was a very impressive event held in May last year, which drew more than 700 participants, a lot of members from the community, business, academia and politics. So it covered themes from livability and climate to democracy and movement, and produced the M2050 vision document, which we'll unpack a little bit today. And it was under the tagline, Liveable Melbourne, Growing Stronger Together. The vision articulates 8 community aspirations, but is deliberately high level. And then in the current context, you've obviously got the council plan 2025-29, the 4-year delivery framework, which sort of sits underneath that. So the 2050 summit was a big, ambitious thing to do in your first year. Why that and why now?
Yeah, it was an ambitious thing to do. It was a grand gathering at Town Hall. Close to 1,000 people were involved.
It was a big photo up on stage of the group, wasn't it?
It was incredible, and it's an amazing photograph. I hope people will look back at it in 100 years from now and see the extraordinary diversity of Melbourne in 2025. And look, the thinking behind it was I wanted to bring Melbourne together. I felt that, we'd had some challenging years around COVID. I felt like, we're becoming fractured as a community. And so I really wanted to, get the arms around the city, bring us all together.
Yeah, sometimes that symbolism's important, isn't it, after a big crisis like COVID?
100%, Sean. And bring Melbourne together for a big conversation about who are we, what do we stand for, where are we going, what do we want to be famous for as a city, and what are the practical projects and plans that are going to help deliver Melbourne, the city we want to be. And the number one objective, I'll be honest, was about trying to bring Melburnians together again and make us connect and make people look around this huge room, this grand gathering and go, oh, I've had the best day today. I've had some great conversations and wow, we're a great city, and just remind people of that. And then the second objective, I guess, was to map out a bit of a roadmap for, where do we want to get to in 2050 and how we're going to get there. And what do we need to do to make it happen?
So when you pictured a successful summit outcome, and you sort of alluded to it there with just the importance of bringing people together after COVID, but what does, in practical terms, I suppose, success actually look like? Is it the ideas on all the butcher's papers that was floating around all the tables on the day I was a participant, or is it something else?
So at the high level, I was really pleased to hear about the ambition that people have for Melbourne. Melburnians really love this city. There's an intensity to the love people have for this city, which you don't see in other places. So that was the first thing that I was really reminded of, and it was a beautiful thing. The second thing was the ambition that people have for the city. People do agree, we're a big city now, and we're a global city, and, we're a city that's going places. And so to feel that sense of ambition for Melbourne, I think was really, really important. Thirdly, there was a real sense of, this is a city that's got values. This is a city where we do look out for each other. We might be, a city of 5.5 million people, but it's also a city where, it feels like a village. People know each other. People reach out to each other. Even during the COVID years, you saw Melbourne at its lowest point, but you also saw the best of people who live here, the way we, cared for each other. So that was a really important thing as well. In terms of what we see for priorities for Melbourne. So yes, there was that strong ambition to see Melbourne grow as a big city as a really prosperous city where, you know, our businesses and our economy flourishes. But there was also this very strong sense that that we're doing this for a purpose, and that is to make Melbourne a city which is very livable, where anyone from anywhere in the world can come here and live their absolute best life. They can flourish. They can live a life of dignity, of purpose. And so that was something that came through really strongly. And so then there was a conversation, well, okay, how do we deliver on that? And so, you know, there's a really good conversation about how do we make sure that people who are new to Melbourne get good opportunities? How do we ensure that, you know, people aren't left behind as their city grows? How do we make sure we get our planning for the city right, so that as Melbourne grows, we protect that livability that we're so famous for? How do we step up if it's around sustainability? There was a lot of great thinking around making Melbourne a 24-hour city as well, you know, so moving to 24-hour transport system. One of a very practical thing that came out, which I loved, was the idea of a swimmable Yarra, Birrarung.
It's gathering momentum globally, isn't it?
So that was a great, that was an idea that has been around in some other cities around the world.
And you've now signed up to that Swimmable Cities Charter, haven't you?
We have indeed, Sean. So it popped up at the Melbourne 2050 Summit and got a lot of support there. So now at the City of Melbourne, we have signed on to the Global Swimmable Cities Charter and we're doing it. We are making our Yarra Birrarung swimmable.
So those are some of the bigger picture visions that you hoped that the day would produce. I mean, there was, because I remember participating and there was a lot of stuff that was, I suppose, common knowledge to us all about what we want to see, as you say, maybe a more greener city, more community infrastructure improved, but then some of that far-reaching stuff like a swimmable Yarra, like micro-mobility in transport in the air, I don't know, all these sorts of more far-reaching ideas, flying cars, dare I say.
Yes, there was a real mix of ideas, wasn't it? But look, that was part of the fun of the day. And, you know, not every idea is going to come to fruition, but gee, it's great doing something like that. It hadn't happened in, Melbourne for at least a decade, so it was timely. In terms of other ideas that I thought were terrific out of the day, the idea of celebrating Indigenous seasons in Melbourne. So, Melbourne basically transposed the 4 seasons from Europe onto southeastern Australia. And that doesn't necessarily work so great. Whereas you look at the Wurundjeri seasons, the 6 seasons, you actually see that it probably maps better to the changing weather over a year in this part of the world. And so that was like a really great idea that we're now doing a bit of work around at Melbourne Town Hall. So that was another really practical example. I also thought, I heard loud and clear the message around community safety as well. It was particularly hearing from some of the international students who were there on the day talking about, at times they don't feel safe. Who
are a huge part of our economy.
A massive part of, well, not just our economy, they're a massive part of
community.
Melbourne and our community, and we love our international students. So hearing some of the students say they don't feel safe in Melbourne, that really got to me. And hearing, women there as well say, hey, we don't feel safe. So that was a really pointed thing that came out as well. Yeah.
Was there one particular moment from the summit day itself that stayed with you?
Look, I know you were there, Sean. I don't know if you remember a young woman by the name of Ali Rahman. She was a student at Melbourne University and she gave one of the most powerful speeches I've ever heard about her life as a Melburnian. Ali has a Bengali cultural background, and she, started by saying, I have people come up to me and say, hey, where do you come from? And she says, I'm from Melbourne. She's second generation Melburnian, captain of a school, I won't go through her CV, but an incredible young woman doing incredible things here in Melbourne, living the best Melbourne life. And she just talked a little bit about what her experience has given her cultural background, and it was very, very powerful. Yeah. But so inspiring as well. And ultimately her story of optimism for Melbourne and, what she sees as her future in this city, I still go back to it when I'm having a bad day.
Yeah, nice. Beautiful Melbourne story. I think it's important to unpack some of the numbers behind some of these visions as well. And whilst these don't provide an indication of what the picture looks like by 2050, it does start to paint some picture of what we're looking at. So in Melbourne today, there's currently about 189,000 residents, projected to be 280,000 by 2040. There's 103,000 homes today, projected to be 135 by 2040. And of course, that's off the back of the housing statement with the state government released, I think, in recent years, that projects double the amount of homes in Melbourne, I think, by 2050. So a lot of work to do there. 652,000 jobs today in Melbourne. That's projected to hit 824,000 by 2040. At the moment, we have 55% who are born overseas, 63% renting, 40% single-person households. Melbourne contributes $127 billion to gross local product, representing 22% of Victoria's economy. And the saddest statistic is that the last count, from what I could find, 73 people are still sleeping rough on any given night on Melbourne streets. So the numbers in the current council plans I've just painted there are pretty striking. When you see Melbourne's population heading towards 280,000 residents by 2040, Nick, what does that mean for how the city has to be planned and delivered?
Yeah, those numbers are striking, aren't they? Greater Melbourne is the fastest growing city in Australia. In fact, it's one of the fastest growing cities in the advanced world. And the City of Melbourne is the fastest growing municipality in Greater Melbourne. People talk about the growth corridors and the outer suburbs. In fact, City of Melbourne is the fastest growing, which is extraordinary. So that means that we need to absolutely get the planning right for our city and make sure that as we get bigger, we're also getting better. We can be bigger and better, I believe that, but we've got to get the right policy settings in place, make sure that we are providing high quality, affordable housing for people that is well serviced by good amenity, good parks, good schools, good health services, great job opportunities, protecting that livability, giving people that opportunity to flourish, live a life of purpose, a life of dignity.
Yeah.
So it's not easy to get all those things right. I kind of see that as that's my number one job at the City of Melbourne, is as our city grows, how do we protect that livability that we're famous for, while at the same time we are growing. A couple of other amazing numbers you just took us through there. 54% of people born overseas. Just think about that, Sean. Every second person you pass on the street in this city was born overseas. Yeah. It's amazing. And it's actually something we can be very proud of. This is a very welcoming city. We're a city of immigrants. I came here from another country. And you can come to this city from anywhere in the world and build your best life. And people will give you a go. Yeah. And you can succeed no matter what your background. I think that's amazing. And you can also live in this city and continue to celebrate your cultural heritage as well. I think that's great. That makes Melbourne a more interesting and exciting and dynamic city. So I think that's an extraordinary statistic. You mentioned homelessness and that homeless statistic at the end there. That is one of the things that does keep me awake at night. It's we do an on-street count. We've got a by name list as well, where we try to have the name of people who are sleeping rough on our city, so we can try and help them. That number is lower than it's been in quite a number of years. Pre-COVID, it was close to 500. Now it's down to around, I think you said 73. Might have actually bumped up a little bit in recent months since that data you've got there was reported. But, it's still 80 odd too high. And, for a city that is as successful and prosperous as Melbourne, that number should be zero. Yeah.
I mean, homelessness is a global issue, and I wanted to cite that figure of rough sleepers, A, because it's important, but B, when you paint it against the number of jobs that we're projecting in the City of Melbourne by 2040, 824,000, does it give you hope, I suppose, that when those are the forecasts that we can start to really eat in, or better yet, actually end homelessness on our streets?
Yes, I think it's very achievable, and we've done some really great things that I'm very proud of at the City of Melbourne. The Make Room facility on Little Bourke Street, which was championed by Sally Capp, one of her finest achievements, is a 50 apartment facility for homeless and marginalised people. From
602 Little Bourke Street, I believe.
That's it. Helping some of the most vulnerable people in our community. And it's got all the wraparound services with it there as well. So CoHealth has got a facility there. There's GP services, mental health services, a dental clinic, job services. So this is about trying to help people get on that pathway to turning around their lives. So we're very, very proud of that at the City of Melbourne. And here's an important point, Sean. City of Melbourne didn't have to do that, right? There's nothing in the state constitution or any regulations that says that's something that's a job for local government. Yeah. But we just stepped up at the City of Melbourne and said, damn it, we're going to do this because it's not acceptable to us that people are sleeping rough on our streets in the way they are. And every level of government's got a role to play here. And so we're going to step up. We also, in our recent budget, have announced new on-street services. These are outreach services. For the first time, we're putting, trained mental health professionals on the street. These are people who are trained in how to deal with people with acute mental health
and they're
issues.
Complementing your community safety officer team.
Indeed. They are indeed. And so, our philosophy here is about making Melbourne safer and kinder. Yeah. And we can do that. Those two things are not exclusive. Making Melbourne safe doesn't mean we need to be, cruel. We are being safer and kinder. We've got the community safety officers, tackling antisocial behaviour, being that very visible safety presence. We've got these new outreach teams, being that caring hand, that kind hand that helps people who need it.
Yeah. Best and fairest city, as you say. Let's get into the centrepiece of the episode now. Some fairly rapid fire episode recaps. You don't have to be too quick. There's not too much pressure here. You're welcome to elaborate on some of them because obviously some of the topics require a little bit more of a substantial response. But we spent this season going deep into a lot of the issues shaping Melbourne's future. So I just want to run through them quickly and get your take. I suppose think of it as the Lord Mayor's debrief on the city. Episode 1, we had the CEO of Queen Victoria Market come on, Matt Elliott, to talk about the market's future. Obviously one of the city's most loved and contested institutions, it's fair to say. It's also carrying a lot of weight around the renewal, trader pressures, changing habits. So where do you see Queen Victoria Market in 2050?
In 2050, Queen Victoria Market will be the most vibrant outdoor market in the world. And here in Melbourne, it'll celebrate its incredible heritage, but also offer a market offering which brings millions of people to visit it every year. And it'll be the jewel in the crown of Melbourne's food scene and our visitor economy as well.
Is the tension between heritage and modernisation something that can be resolved in your opinion, or is it just the permanent condition of a place like QVM, do you think?
Oh, look, I understand that there'll always be some tensions there. I mean, in some ways we love QVM to death. We just love what it stands for and its history. But we also know that it's got to evolve and the offer's got to evolve. And that's sometimes not easy. But it has to be done because if we don't, the market will die.
Yep.
But it's got so much going for it. That's where I do my shopping each weekend. It's part of the fabric of Melbourne, and it will certainly continue to be not just to 2050, but 2150 as well.
Yeah. And in our second episode, we had your former councillor colleague on here, Stephen Mayne.
Yes.
Shareholder activist, founder of Crikey. Bit of a sponge-like brain, I always like to say.
He's an extraordinary guy.
And actually something you said before about Melbourne's strengths being a multicultural city, I mean, that was something that came from the conversation with him about international students and a reflection of Melbourne being, in his opinion, the world's most successful multicultural city and something we should play on. So let's get international students first, because they are a huge part of Melbourne's identity and economy, as we've touched on already. But how do we remain a genuinely great city for students and not just a fee-paying pipeline?
So I think education is Melbourne's great gift to the world. I'm so proud as mayor that we are, one of the big international education centres globally. And the fact that every year tens of thousands of students, in fact hundreds of thousands of students come here to study is brilliant. It's so good for our city. To see all those young faces from all over the world here getting an education. You couldn't think of a better industry. You couldn't think of something better for our community and for the fabric of Melbourne.
Yeah.
So we've got to keep protecting that, nurturing that, ensuring that when students study here, they get an absolute world-class education and that it's competitive with any of the other offers anywhere else in the world. It is a market that is under a bit of pressure at the moment. The rest of the world has cottoned on that, international education is a great, great sector for your city.
Yeah. And let's get into the impacts from COVID, which we don't want to touch on too much because it's well in the past, but important to reflect. But the CBD is still carrying some scars from COVID, I think it's fair to say. Probably no greater example of that than office vacancy, which is still sitting around 18% at my last look. So what's your honest read on where things are headed as far as reactivating the CBD and some of those places that we previously knew the CBD for being?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I follow pedestrian data for Melbourne. I get a daily update on how many people are visiting our city, walking the footpaths of our streets, and I can tell you that Melbourne is busier now than it was in 2019. So there's more people who visit the city over a course of a week than they did in 2019, and our economy is about 10% bigger as well, and there's more being spent in our city as well. Having said that, you are right. We still bear the scars of COVID. Melbourne has bounced back, but it's come back a bit differently. There's a different rhythm to our city. And, one of the scars, if you like, is that people aren't working in offices in the way they did pre-COVID. Working from home has become very much a feature of people's working lives, and that has had a big impact on office vacancy rates. And it's something that we're working closely with landlords on, and working to evolve the offer of the city. In a nutshell, we need to move from being a CBD to a CAD, from being a central business district to being a central activity district.
Love it.
Not just a place where people to come to do their work, but a place where people come to meet people, to learn, a place where people come to, for a night out, to catch a cultural gig. Where they come on the big occasions, when they want to get together with the community and celebrate. And so it's a place where people live as well. And so making Melbourne a central activity district is the core central strategy for our growth plan for Melbourne.
Wow, a CAD, that's a very exciting takeaway. Third episode of the series, we touched on housing and homelessness. We had the founder of Housing All Australians, Rob Prattle, on for that conversation. You've already touched on amazing initiatives that the City of Melbourne is leading on its own accord, like Make Room. But when we talk about that housing activity statement that the state government released and the need to build double the amount of homes in Melbourne by 2050, what does the City of Melbourne's role actually look like in that context, given that you're not a planning authority for the whole metro area? So where's the real lever you think you can pull as a municipal authority?
Yeah, I mean, the City of Melbourne, we don't have the money of the Commonwealth Government to put into housing. We don't have all the legislative powers of the state. But as I was sort of talking earlier, I do think we can still make a big difference in this space. So we're the planning authority in the City of Melbourne, and we do really lean in, particularly in our activity areas. So whether that's South Bank, Docklands, Fishermans Bend, Arden-Macaulay, like we have approved tens of thousands of new residences in those areas that can build the homes that Melbourne needs in the right locations. Those growth areas that I just spoke of are right on the doorstep of the city, the biggest employment market in Australia, the Melbourne CBD, or CAD as we'll now call it. All the services are nearby, education, health, etc. And so as a city, we have approved new residents right on the doorstep of the city in the tens of thousands, which I hope to see built in future years. I also think that while we need to do a lot more to tackle housing affordability, in Melbourne we also need to keep perspective on what it's like in other cities.
Yes.
So the average rent in Greater Melbourne is about $590 a week. In Sydney, it's $800 a week. So it is $210 a week cheaper to rent in Melbourne compared to Sydney. You can do a lot in your life with an extra $210 in your pocket, and that helps, fuel the livability of our city. And so I do think that we have some very significant housing challenges, but I also think we're making some good progress in Melbourne as well.
It's worth noting we're having this conversation the day after the federal budget, and it wasn't just any federal budget, there was some pretty major reforms, particularly on housing taxation. Do you see those sorts of reforms helping?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I think that our tax system for too long had been structured in a way that it had turned homes into essentially investment, an investment category. And so that had artificially inflated the price of housing in Australia because it's an investment class. And so we need to make sure that homes are first and foremost for people. And so, I do think those taxation changes will make it easier for everyday Australians to get into the housing market.
Yep. And another episode, we traversed into the topic of city safety, which I got to admit, coming into the series was probably not something ordinarily, I'd say 5 years ago, I probably would have had a whole episode on. But as you know from your own Lord Mayoral election campaign, it was a huge issue. It was probably the critical issue of that campaign. And you've had a fair bit to say in it during your early time as Lord Mayor. So there's a layered response emerging, isn't there, from police to your community safety officers, outreach, CCTV. So are we striking the right model, or is there still a bit of work to do you think?
Yeah, so a bit like you, when I was first elected a councillor, if you'd told me that one day I'd be Lord Mayor and in my first year I'd be saying city safety is my most pressing priority, I wouldn't have believed you. But the truth is it emerged as a really big issue for Melbourne, and it wasn't just a perception problem. Like the data showed that there was a challenge there and we needed to step up. And so, we took the radical step at the City of Melbourne of introducing community safety officers. These are employed by the City of Melbourne. We've never seen a city safety force on the streets before. But I did it because I said we needed an unparalleled effort to make sure not only that Melbourne is safe, but people feel safe as well. And I think it's made a big difference. When I walk down the streets of the city, I often have people come up and thank me for the CSOs. I go out on patrol with them, and I see the great work they do around the city. They're terrific. And so that's why in our second budget, we've actually doubled their number. And so, I think they're making a really important difference in terms of tackling antisocial behaviour, illegal drinking and drug taking around the city, but also doing a lot to help people as well. Often people who find themselves in a bad way, panic, reaching out with a helping hand to them as well. And the other thing I hear all the time from the shopkeepers, the traders, visitors to Melbourne, is they really appreciate seeing that visible safety presence on the street, someone in uniform who's there to help if needed. Yeah.
Another episode, an early episode that we covered was Melbourne's favourite punching bag in many ways, Docklands. But obviously a precinct that has unbelievable, untapped potential, particularly from our perspective as the publisher of Docklands News. So Docklands does get a hard time. I think it's still fairly misunderstood. Do you think it is misunderstood from your perspective, or is there now a clearer story about what it's becoming?
Look, I absolutely love Docklands. It's Melbourne's waterfront suburb. It's got the best sunsets in our city. and its potential is just enormous. It is true, mistakes have been made around Docklands. You could do a whole podcast episode on that.
Yes,
you probably have.
We did.
What am I going to do as mayor? So I want to really improve the public realm around Docklands. That means getting more greenery in there, softening up some of those concrete expanses. Yeah. I also want to bring more activity and give people more reasons to visit Docklands. So this weekend, for example, we're having a seafood market down at Docklands. This is sort of one of the ideas I took to the election. We're running a trial this weekend. Be great. Just get down there, have some seafood, enjoy a drink, and be terrific. We're also going to see the Melbourne wheel turning.
Yes.
Again, a lot of cynics, Sean, said it would never happen when I promised that, but it's gonna spin again, baby.
Yep.
The wheel will be turning very soon, and it's gonna be a great moment. It stopped during COVID, and I think to see it turn again will be an important symbolic moment for our Melbourne. So that's going, and also there's a Little India idea, which is great. That's in our budget. We're doing our community consultation around that at the moment. Melbourne is Australia's Indian capital, and in the same way as we've got a Chinatown, a Little Italy up there in Lygon Street, a Koreatown we opened last year. The idea is to have a small Indian precinct in Docklands, which I think will be a great draw card for the area.
Yeah, you sort of alluded to it there in many ways, but there are some governance issues, I suppose, that still are systemic in Docklands. And there's also this ongoing conversation, I think, among many people in Docklands around what exactly is Docklands. It's a mixed-use precinct. It's also a place where residents love. So getting that balance right, I think, is important in the context of all those wonderful initiatives that you just flagged there. But in a nutshell, what does a fully realised Docklands look to you by 2050?
I think it'll be Melbourne's beloved waterfront suburb, which is the envy of other suburbs of Melbourne. It'll have, the energy and cultural buzz of, say, a St Kilda, together with being a really highly desired destination for workers and for employers as well. It'll be a place where people promenade on weekends. I really want to make more of the waterfront walk around Docklands, and so in the same way as people go and walk the Tan in the Domain Gardens,
walk the harbour.
Yeah, we will walk Docklands, walk the harbour on weekends. And so you can see it. The bones are there. We've just got to tune it. But I'm really confident we'll get there, and Docklands will be one of the most vibrant, waterfront suburbs, not just in Australia but anywhere in the world. In fact, but I want people from around the world to be coming to Melbourne to study how we do it. Yeah.
When you talk about promenading around the harbour, there was a project that sprung to mind, being the extension of Green Line up Docklands on that north bank, which is a great segue into the next episode, where we had the Yarra River Business Association's Executive Officer Liz Joldeski to talk about the Yarra River and also the surrounding precincts, including the Arts Precinct expansion. So Green Line, let's start there, is the big public realm project of this generation. It was obviously a big vision of your predecessor, Lord Mayor Sally Capp. It's hit a few snags, though, obviously, in recent times. But what does success look like in Green Line to you in the short term?
Yeah, Green Line is a wonderful vision for Melbourne and a great vision of Sally Capp's. And the idea is quite a simple one. It's about making the north bank of the Yarra a place where people come together to promenade in the same way as we transformed the south bank of the Yarra 30 years ago. And so from the tennis centre all the way down to Docklands, linking up those public spaces and walkways and making it a beautiful experience for people. So, unfortunately, Unfortunately, Green Line became a bit of a political football in the last term of council, and people lost sight of the fact that it's a brilliant vision that we are going to deliver on. And there's already 3 sections of Green Line which have been delivered or are currently being delivered. So the first was Birrarung, fantastic. Second was Seafarers Rest in the Maritime Heritage section. And then thirdly is down near Collins Wharf down in Docklands, currently under construction. And there'll be a fourth stage, which we'll be talking about very soon, which I'm very excited about. So Green Line is happening. I guess the one thing that has changed from the original vision was, it was originally something we were hoping to get done over 4 years.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, we didn't see the funding flow from the state and the Commonwealth to the same extent that we had hoped for. So we've had to, stretch out the delivery time frame a bit, but we will get it done, and it's going to be a transformative urban and greening policy for our city.
Yeah, that outstanding component of Green Line, which you just alluded to, which is sort of between Princess Bridge up to Melbourne Aquarium at the turning basin there. It's a great segue actually into the next component of this conversation. It's not necessarily the sexiest one, but whenever you talk to stakeholders down in the Yarra River precinct, governance is an issue that comes up. There's layers upon layers of governance down there and landowners. So there's this old adage actually, which I mentioned to Liz during the podcast, where if you trip off the banks of the Yarra into the water, you fall through about 4 nets of bureaucracy. So it can include state, it can include the City of Melbourne, Parks Victoria, and then the water itself is Melbourne Water. And not to mention VicTrack and all those other stakeholders down in this outstanding component that I allude to. So what needs to change along the Yarra River precinct from that governance perspective to sort of get things done a little bit more efficiently, do you think?
Look, you are right about the complex web of bureaucracy that applies to that waterway. I call it a complexitron.
Yes.
And you sort of wonder, what do I do during the day? A lot of my day is just spent ringing through various government authorities, property owners, stakeholders to just cut through and get things done.
You had this issue with graffiti in many ways down that precinct, didn't you? Where it was like talking to the right person to see who could clean or if the City of Melbourne could lend a hand. Absolutely.
So, one of the big commitments we've made is making the Birrarung, the Yarra, swimmable, and that's going to require bringing everyone together, all those different agencies, to come together to unite around that vision and do what's needed to be done.
Yeah.
But your point is right. It can be very hard to get things done in Melbourne, particularly along the Yarra River, because of the number of overlapping governing institutions and authorities.
Yeah. Let's get to Fishermans Bend. We had Guy Naselli on from the Fishermans Bend Business Forum to unpack its current state and its future. It's obviously Australia's largest urban renewal project, but Auditor General had a noteworthy report last year which was outlining that delivery isn't on track. What's your honest assessment of where Fishermans Bend is at, and is transport the obvious blocker?
Yes, Sean, I would say Fishermans Bend is my biggest frustration in Melbourne. I am 1,000% signed on to the vision for Fishermans Bend as Australia's biggest urban redevelopment project. You look at the size of that of the land holdings there in Fishermans Bend. It's huge. It's 6 times the size of the Hoddle Grid, and it's right there on the doorstep of the city. And it's got capacity. The vision is for 80,000 residents, 80,000 jobs. The truth is, both of those numbers could be much, much higher. So in terms of delivering really affordable, high quality housing right where it's needed in Melbourne, Fishermans Bend's your solution.
Yep.
In terms of building new employment places in Melbourne, that's a great opportunity as well. But it's not happening at the moment, or certainly it's not happening at the pace that we would like to see. And it's been held up by a number of things, but probably top of the list is just a lack of investment in key infrastructure. And at the top of that list is transport.
Yep.
The original vision was for a tram line down into Fishermans Bend and for a train line as well, Metro 2.
Yeah.
And now the state government made the decision to prioritise other projects like suburban rail loop. And look, that's the prerogative of the state government, but the opportunity cost of those investments going elsewhere is Australia's biggest urban redevelopment opportunity has not been unlocked. And for me, as the Lord Mayor of Melbourne, that is very, very frustrating.
Yeah. We also had another episode on Lygon Street, which is carrying a lot of identity questions of its own. You're a Carlton tragic.
I am.
Both
I
on
live
and off.
there with my wife and 3 daughters.
I was going to say both on and off the field. Is it still Melbourne's Little Italy? And does it need to be?
Oh, gee, that's a great topic. I'm assuming that was Sergio Alderucci who
It
you were
was.
talking about there. The short answer is I think Lygon Street is going through a renaissance at the moment. And it is a renaissance that has an Italian twist to it. There are some new pizzerias that have opened in recent times. There are some new bars that have a very much a Roma feel to them as well. And that's awesome. We love that. And so I think the Italian heritage is woven into the fabric of Lygon Street, and we've got to protect that. At the same time, I don't think we're going to take Lygon Street back to how it was in the 1960s. And so, you're seeing an emerging sort of Middle Eastern precinct at the southern end of Lygon Street, which is quite exciting.
Yeah.
We're seeing some really innovative new dining options coming along the street as well, and I think that's exciting. So the Lygon Street is evolving, and I think it's in the best position at the moment than it's been in at least a decade, and I think that's really exciting. For our part of the City of Melbourne, of course, we're investing heavily in Lygon Street, putting the bluestone down both sides of the street, which has a magical effect, I've got to say, on the feel of the street and the quality of the retail and shop offerings. We've got our Lygon Street Market on Sundays here in Argyle Square. We're working on the Italian Fest as well. And we're putting a fountain, I'm hoping, in Argyle Square, which will be a beautiful celebration of the Italian community and a new reason and a new spot for people to meet in that quarter.
Yeah. And our final episode, Arden-Macaulay. Again, people sort of liken it to, we want to learn from Arden-Macaulay not falling into the trap being a Docklands 2.0. It's not necessarily a characterisation I like as a Docklander. But do you think we're actually learning from the mistakes of Docklands in those precincts at the moment?
Look, I hope so.
Yeah.
It's at a really critical point right now. Very soon there will be an announcement from the state government about the outcomes of the advisory panel on effectively the master plan for that precinct, as well as an announcement about how the state will approach development partnerships in that area. And so the City of Melbourne has been a very strong advocate for getting that right, but that decision is currently in the court of the state government. And so, it's mission critical for that area. But I do think it's got huge potential. It's a great location there, sort of buttressing Kensington, North Melbourne, West Melbourne. It's a fantastic location. And of course, with the metro station servicing it, we're avoiding one of the mistakes that was made with Fishermans Bend, which didn't have the transport infrastructure. Well, in the case of Arden-Macaulay, we've definitely got it.
Yeah. So let's zoom out now to a bigger identity question, the kind of city that Melbourne chooses to be. What makes Melbourne Melbourne, and what do you as Lord Mayor want to protect, grow or change about it? So circling back to the Melbourne 2050 vision now, to sort of recap, it says everybody is welcome. That's easy to say and I suppose harder to deliver in some ways. So what does it mean in practice to you?
Yeah, so I do think that Melbourne is the best city in the world, and I'm not just saying that. In fact, Time Out recently announced Melbourne as its best city in the world for 2026. And if you look at why they found our city to be deserving of that accolade, the fact that we are so welcoming and friendly was actually one of the things we scored most highly on. Then there was, the fact that this is such a lively, energetic city with that incredible hospitality and events culture, which we love and sets us apart. We're the only city in the world with a Formula One Grand Prix and a Grand Slam tennis tournament. That was an incredible weekend back in March. We had more than 2 million people in the city on one weekend celebrating all these events. Moomba Grand Prix. Yeah,
events is a huge strength, isn't it?
It's incredible. And so, look, we've got to keep fighting and working hard every day to make sure that Melbourne continues to be the city where you can come here from any city in the world or grow up here and live the best life possible.
Yeah.
And giving people that opportunity to live their best Melbourne life is what really motivates me, you know. I just think Melbourne has got so much potential as well. You know, we are going to continue to grow as a city for decades and decades and decades to come. There's not many cities in the world that can say that. We've got such a big future in front of us, and we've just got to get it right so that as we become bigger, we also get better.
Yeah, and I think it's important to emphasise First Nations custodianship and knowledge whenever we're talking about the future of Melbourne and the current state of Melbourne for that matter. And it's woven throughout the vision, the 2050 vision. So what does it mean for the city to genuinely honour that, not just acknowledge it?
Yeah, well, we are an Aboriginal city, and I am very proud of the fact that, this land has the oldest continuous culture on Earth. It's extraordinary. It's a distinctive and unique feature.
It's amazing.
Of Naarm, and so we should celebrate that. You know, I'm reminded of this, with my years at Movember. You know, you get on an international conference call or people from overseas come here and they, participate in a welcome to country, and they're always like, wow, this is so cool.
Yeah.
We don't have this in our home countries, and so as Melburnians, we should remind ourselves this is something that is unique and distinctive to this place on the planet, and we should celebrate it. And so I am very proud of Melbourne's status as a Aboriginal city.
Yep. And final reflections, Lord Mayor, looking to the long view now, if you had to pick three things that you would most want to be remembered for as Lord Mayor, what are they?
So that's a great question. Look, I think number one is, we remember those challenging years of COVID and the lockdowns. And so, I would like people to look back on this period of Melbourne and say, this was the time when Melbourne really got its mojo going and got its swagger going. And, I think, in my first year as mayor, I really want to get the confidence going in Melbourne again and remind people of what a great city we live in and how much there is to celebrate in our city. In terms of the medium term, I really want to see Melbourne become that prosperous, successful city as well. If you want to build a business, build something big, well, you can do it in Melbourne, and there's no better place to do it.
Yeah.
And then, look, the third thing is just, in terms of the long term, is just securing Melbourne's place is that livable, sustainable, fair city. When I talk about Melbourne being the best and fairest city in the world, we can't be the best unless we're also the fairest. And so it's, making us that city where, we look out for each other, we love and respect each other, and it's a city where everyone gets a fair go. Yeah,
and as a final recapping prompt under the theme of 2050 Melbourne, so if we were to hypothetically to do this again in 2050, Nick, what do you want to be able to say Melbourne became?
Oh, look, I hope that when you come back to Melbourne in 2050, you'll find a city where people not just talk about our remarkable parks and gardens, the big ones that we're now famous for, but the way you see greenery through all our streets and buildings. This Garden City agenda that I'm driving is very much about greening up our city neighbourhoods and streets. And
you've got a Garden City ambassador now as well?
We do indeed. We've got two. The second thing is I really want to pedestrianise the city core. I want to make Melbourne a walkable city. So again, in our recent budget, we announced that we're going pedestrian first along Flinders Street and we're reworking the street surface there to make it a pedestrian first area. And so we're going to do the little streets and the retail core of the city. But let's see how far we go with that. I think that'll really make Melbourne a city that's more welcoming to even more people, and it's going to be great for the businesses of the city as well. And so I want us to be famous for that. And then, look, finally, it's just that I want Melbourne to be a city that is celebrated for its diversity as well. The fact that we've got, people from 160 different backgrounds speaking 170 different languages, practicing 80 different faiths. That's something extraordinary we have here in Melbourne, and I want us to be famous for that as well, knowing, of course, that we are, at the end of the day, all one Melbourne.
Lord Mayor, thanks for joining us on the Future Melbourne podcast today.
Thank you, Sean. Thank you for tuning in, all the hyper-local listeners.